Richard wasn't the leader of men. Lloyd was that father figure. He had this ability to get people together. There's nothing much to do after you retire in the West Indies. I mean, you can't come on a podcast and speak to Cyrus Brocha.
I felt a couple of short balls here which I wasn't prepared for.
Somewhere I felt West Indies cricket, or he didn't do justice to West Indies cricket.
It's in the air. It's a six.
Welcome to a century of stories cricket brought to you by IDFC FIRST Bank, now recognized by Forbes among the world's best banks of 2025. Well, this episode is about the decline, sadly for me, my favorite team, the West Indies, decline of the West Indies in the 90s. And with me, I'm proud to tell you, one of my favorite people, one of the greats of Mumbai cricket, captain Mumbai to many great, glorious victories, and actually knows all the Mumbai stories as well. So we must bring him back for that at some point. But today, Shishir Hattangadi, who's been around. He's done everything. He's played, I think, Baroda. You've been selectors, you've been coach, you've been mentor, you've been father figure, you've been figure, you played cricket on the Maidans, in the schools. So you're the real deal. This is the real deal, ladies and gentlemen. Show your hands. The hands of a hard... Yeah, look at how big...
Hi, Cyrus.
There's a science
The
to it.
problem is, I was never born at Malabar Hill like
Hey,
Douglas Jardine.
Hey, 1 minute.
Like Douglas Jardine and Cyrus Brocha.
1 minute. You're a Saint Marian. Okay?
True.
One of the privileged schools of Mumbai. So don't you dare, otherwise I'll dig up your past. Don't suddenly decide to go the other way.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, so Shish, sad. We've had so much time together back in the days when we used to share some lassi at the Bombay gym. And one of the big topics was, because I love the West Indies, and you also fascinated by that team. It was your generation ka team.
Absolutely.
The 80s, Clive Lloyd at his best, those 4 fast bowlers, nobody in front of your eye line, all the fielders at the back, with the square and behind on both sides. And then suddenly, just in a flash, and they kept saying that we have 12 fast bowlers that could play instead of those 4. There are 10 more waiting in the wings. And it suddenly just all disappeared. Let's just trace that back a little bit. People forget, I think Pakistan held them 1-1 also in the late 80s, Imran's team, both in the West Indies and in Pakistan. So there were a few cracks. They didn't lose a series, but there were a few drawn series here and there. So there were a few cracks happening. But I think it was finally in the mid-90s when Australia breached the Citadel finally and brought them down. And Richardson's team was defeated. But trace for us the decline and how it happened and how nobody noticed it coming.
Cyrus, the first memories of West Indies for me are, talking to some of my seniors, and seniors meaning the Gavaskars of the world. And when they talked about what West Indies or the team that they had seen as growing up as teenagers was when Sobers, Kanhai, all these guys came to India and played at the CCI, and they would be staying in the rooms at the CCI. And probably, walking down straight from the room after a late night or early morning.
Same thing in West Indian culture.
Yeah, and come down to the ground, finish games early and go to the race course.
That's Sobers.
That's Sobers' story, where he finished the game early, hit a couple on the, on top of the CCI and said, I have to go to the races at 2:30.
Wow.
So we've always admired them for being this flamboyant, charismatic team that really played fearlessly. We talk about fearless cricket in today's times. They played fearlessly, and then they had a father figure in Clive Lloyd. West Indies is a complex country. The different countries coming together, islands coming together. There's internal politics. There are different governments. And Clive Lloyd actually congregated the whole country, all the countries together to make them one unit. And of course, what we saw when they first came to India. Do you remember when Viv and Greenwich and all these guys?
I was too young when the young Viv came. My dad tells me stories about how I told him there's nobody like Bishan Singh Bedi at the Bombay gym in the lobby. And then next day, I think Andy Roberts went berserk in a...
Yes, and that was the era that we remember the West Indies growing up. And if you wanted to play cricket, it had to be like the West Indians. Whether it was a Greenwich, whether it was Viv Richards, or whether it was even unknown players like Larry Gomes and Fouth Bacchus, the guys who really batted.
Later on, Logie.
Logie. I actually played with Logie in Scotland. So there was culture, there was history, there was a romance about West Indians and the way they played.
Different style, right? Their brand of cricket was so flamboyant.
Yes, of course. And when you hear players like Sunil Gavaskar, Dilip Sardesai, the late Dilip Sardesai talk about the West Indians, you felt, wow, this is the way to play cricket. And then what happened after Lloyd and after losing...
Richards didn't lose a series.
Yes.
I know I'm a big fan and all that, but for the record.
Richard wasn't the leader of men. Lloyd was that father figure. He had won 3 World Cups. He had this ability to get people together.
So you think he made a mistake with going to Richards after Lloyd?
Generally, you pick the best player in the team as captain, and West Indies instinctively would have done that.
He was also too big. No? How do you not make him captain? He's very
Absolutely.
king.
The invincible West Indian in those days. And somewhere I think when you have such a great player in your side, for an ordinary player or average player to connect with him may be difficult. And that's we've seen a lot of great players.
Sachin?
Yeah, I would have thought that to connect with them would have been difficult.
Because the gap is so wide, and especially for young guys coming in.
That's where I think West Indies lost out in terms of leadership.
As Lloyd era, mid-80s, comes to an end, you have the Courtney Walshes, Curtly Ambroses coming in, the Benjamins, both of them. You have Patterson a little later on. So the fast bowling stock is still there.
Fast bowling stock is there, and they're natural fast bowlers. So, there's no weight training, there's no gym, they're just strong.
It was your good friend Dilip Venksaku said Patrick was as quick as anyone he ever faced.
Absolutely. And did you see his thighs? They were like,
Can two grown men have this conversation, Shishir?
But he was a big fellow, and he came to India. He was lethal. He was dangerous.
So what was going wrong?
I think they lost out somewhere because of poor administration. Let me be honest. The players didn't connect with the administration. Also, the life.
But was the game growing elsewhere faster and not there? Was that happening?
That was one. Two is the West Indies actually. I think the people became a little smarter. They realized that cricket may not be
the way
a
out.
means to an end, and they started moving out, going to America for jobs.
People talk about this all the time, that Americanization was one of the reasons, the NBA, baseball, all the other sports coming into play.
Absolutely, and a lot
athletics
of players,
for the Jamaicans. Yeah.
I mean, who can forget what they've done for athletics?
Usain Bolt would have been faster than Shoaib Akhtar, but unfortunately he is faster, but on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of talented sportsmen moved out of West Indies, and that was the problem. Also, the disconnect with the board, the administration. I mean, today if you look at how much does a West Indian player earn?
The international player.
International player. He gets about 100,000 if he's a contracted top player from the West Indies board.
And our boys are getting
80 lakhs. But if the same player goes and plays in the BBL, we are not even talking IPL. He gets 4 times the amount. I think he gets 400,000.
For 4 weeks. For 3 to 4 weeks.
So they've got to earn a living. There's nothing much to do after you retire in the West Indies. I mean, you can't come on a podcast and speak to Cyrus Brocha. You will have to do and get paid $1 million.
I felt a couple of short balls here which I wasn't prepared for.
So generally, I find them struggling, and the insecurity of the future, I think, took a lot of talent away, either to America or to the franchisee mode of cricket, or the franchisee
they
system.
switched off the red ball, you're saying.
Just away from just focusing on playing for the pride of your country and the national colors and playing for money. They're two different things. There's no emotion in playing for money. You're being paid what, 400,000, 450,000 to play in the BBL. Why would you play for West Indies? And they get, in addition to that, they get $5,000 a test match. Suppose you're on a 80 lakh salary or contracted salary. Per test match, you would get $5,000 to $7,000 to play. Now, that's not enough for them in today's time.
Also, the competition is getting much more, which is not fair.
Absolutely. I mean, in my time, the little I met the West Indians in those days, they would come to Scotland to play league cricket.
Right.
So I'd ask them, there was the Kali Charans or young Kali Charan, Derek, Alvin's brother. Then there was Gus Logie, there was Jimmy Adams. All these guys played in the leagues.
So they supplement their income with the smaller leagues as well.
Yeah, so I would ask them, I said, what do you do in your free time when you go back? And they said, we go to America, do our shopping for the year, and we go back and we do nothing. We play shield cricket, or what is it, grade cricket. No, what was it called in the West Indies in those days? Shell shield. Go and play that. Do you get paid? No, nothing. Do you have jobs? No, nothing. It wasn't like our time where you had a job with, the conglomerates of India where they paid you for doing nothing. So even if it wasn't huge dollar, but it was a secure job. You could retire at 60 from there if you did nothing. These guys went off, and whatever they saved in their off season or in the playing in the leagues, they would spend living in the West Indies for 6 months. So that's why you found a lot of players taking to drugs, taking to alcohol, and obviously getting getting done with in terms of cricket.
But coming back to we talked about the bowling talent and the late 80s, early 90s. The batting talent was also great. I mean, the rise of Brian Charles Lara, Carl Elwyn Hooper, Chandra Paul a little later after that in the early 90s. There was batting talent as well. You got Richards, Greenwich, Haynes, footsteps to follow, Lloyd, and before that, the Weeks, Walcott, Gary Sobers, Rohan Canning, all those, George Headley going back. So they're huge names, no doubt. But it seemed to be there.
Of course.
I mean, we've discussed Carl Hooper as one of the great talents, but should have been the next Viv or what is the famous statement that you picked up from another legend
What was that?
about Carl Hooper? That
Carl
he could have
Hooper.
been better than
For me,
Sachin?
I think Brian Charles Lara in his book is quoted or somewhere that he was more talented than Sachin. He felt that. And I tend to endorse that. For the simple reason, in 1985, we were traveling with the CCI team to Australia. We were playing games across the country. And there were two cricketers, and CCI, few professionals, few social players.
Yeah.
We played in Melbourne against the Melbourne Crusaders, and there were two youngsters who were playing against us. One was a guy called Winston Benjamin, and one was a young kid called Carl Hooper. And we were playing on these public grounds. So it was like playing in the middle of Azad Maidan, just one match going on. And the boundary would be sort of 75 yards, and then beyond that there was only ground. There was only a field. And our friend Carl Hooper, I was keeping wicket, thankfully, because nobody wanted me to run. I was the only keeper. After his 50, every over took about 10 minutes to complete, because to retrieve the ball, it was not 75 yards.
Go to the next ground. Keep going.
It's like playing in the center of Azad Maidan and hitting the ball near
So
Metro.
almost batting like a left-hander, no? It was just so casual and
He was
timing.
and when I saw him then, I said, my God, this guy is certainly a quality player, and he's something I haven't seen. Technically sound, strong, a lot of time, which great players had. Martin Crowe had that. And two of my favorite players, Martin Crowe, Carl Hooper. Somewhere I felt West Indies cricket, or he didn't do justice to West Indies cricket.
Was the mental...
I think there was that problem. Also, he had a leader in the great Viv Richards. He may not have been able to...
Intimidated by Viv, perhaps?
Who wouldn't? I mean, it's not every day that he comes on a podcast and the guy who's interviewing him gets intimidated.
You're right. Exactly. So I'm saying if you're a fan, it's very difficult sometimes as a fan to take that thing out,
And the aura of Richards,
The aura of
really.
Richards,
I mean, he was...
No, for me, it's another level altogether. He's my god.
Yeah.
But I'm saying even for a young West Indian, and he was that, Richards was West Indies cricket.
Yes, absolutely.
And he was the alpha male.
And for what he had achieved as a batsman, and he was a demolisher of attacks. Now, when he walks into a dressing room, and I can just relate to that. When I was a kid and Gavaskar walked into the dressing room,
were you scared?
In a non-television era, you only heard stories about Gavaskar and the 774 runs, and you kept looking at from the corner of your eye as to what he's doing. Whether it was the way he padded up, the way he prepared himself. There was a lot to learn from that, but you always hesitated to go up to him to talk to him because, he was Gavaskar. It was that era.
Legend factor is always going to be there.
Legend, and, is he approachable? Is he accessible?
Famously, you can't talk to him when he's padding up, from what I gather.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he would switch off.
Yeah.
But we later realized that, he's as normal as he can be, and you have to approach him like a normal human being. But initially, now, there are some people who would make you comfortable, some people who actually ride on that aura, and maybe Carl Hooper just couldn't connect with the great Richards, and he wasn't mentally strong enough to cope with that, and that's what happened.
There's also an age gap, and maybe this is a hypothesis because we are not in the dressing room.
Yeah.
Maybe there was also a bit of a problem, like he was not fulfilling his potential, and so after 3 or 4 innings, or perhaps getting out in certain ways or whatever, to spinners, for example, he was just an incredible player of spins. But if he gets out with an ordinary shot after making 20 or 30, happens 2 or 3 times, it's possible Viv would have said something.
Absolutely, and that happens. Look, when you're a quality player. I mean, take Rohit Sharma, for example. When he gets out, you say,
by the way,
how?
There's a similarity. Both
How?
have the gift of,
And when he plays well, you say, wow.
Yeah.
This is the quality that Hooper had.
I think this is a great metaphor, if you want to use that word.
Yeah.
2 of them.
Yeah, because generally these guys like David Gar or Rohit Sharma,
Super
when they
talent.
get out, they look very casual. They're not casual, but that's the way they play. So dismissals look very soft when they get out. And you as a tragic say, how can you do that? This is just not acceptable. Because you don't realize that they have this natural ability to look careless. It's a great quality when you're doing well. When Rohit times the ball sweetly, you say, wow, this is a piece of cake. But when he gets out similarly, you say, wow, how did he do that? How did he do that? And I think Carl Hooper had that problem.
I'm amazed at your reference because I was thinking this at the same time. It's almost like I can't tell you. Exact idea was in my head that Rohit Sharma, Carl Hooper, they're casual just because they have supreme talent, supreme timing. And especially putting the ball in the air, which Carl Hooper, if you remember, had that way of
just caressing
between
it.
long on and
he was a quality player. And I think if that can be looked at as a template as to why West Indians, the batting quality, I mean, take Lara and take Hooper away. And Chanderpaul for
a little later,
but he looked clumsy. He wasn't actually
50 average,
but great player, a great player. But the point is, he was more of a hard-working batsman. The joy you got watching
but they always
Lara.
had that Larry Gomes. They had one guy who was a bit attritional.
Yeah, but Larry Gomes again was, he was a workman.
Yeah.
He wasn't somebody you'd watch, put down your pint of beer and, walk in through the turnstiles to say, okay, I'm going to watch Larry Gomes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that for Chanderpaul. You'd go to watch a Lara, you'd go to watch a Wave, you'd go to watch Greenwich, you'd go to watch
Hooper when he's performing.
Yeah. Hooper was a great example.
For a second, if you think about that, the fact that Haynes and Greenwich are a difficult act to follow. One of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, opening pair. And then suddenly you don't get openers of that quality at all.
No.
You get a few, some are good, some are okay, but you're not getting anything close to Greenwich and Haynes.
And these two players played a lot in England in the county cricket circuit.
Yeah.
So they were able to, develop their technique.
Yeah.
They looked more traditional in terms of the way they played. That word traditional is gone out of the system today because anything can happen.
Greenwich also had Barry Richards as mentor.
Yeah, you have Barry Richards. You're playing, you're playing at Hampshire. You're playing with the great players. Different conditions, the seaming ball. You obviously develop your craft. And I think Haynes, Richards, all these players played county cricket. Lloyd.
Yeah.
So
all the bowlers.
I mean, for bowlers, it was also learning how to bowl in these conditions.
Malcolm Marshall, Hampshire. I mean,
all of them.
Yeah.
I think the fall of West Indies cricket had a lot to do with these players not playing county cricket. One of the reasons. They weren't earning a living playing county cricket. They were playing in the leagues. Now, good leagues in England pay you well, but you play on weekends.
Yeah.
I played there for 10 years, so I know. So, you play on weekends against the good players. They get paid well, but nothing as much as a county player. But you don't play every day. And I think a lot of their cricket...
The English school was missing from the late 80s and early
because
90s.
they were able to blend their natural talent with the English school of,
Hooper Lara did play, though.
They played.
Yeah.
Hooper played.
Lara's 501 for Warwickshire.
Yes.
I mean,
Lara played.
Big runs, yeah.
But I think a lot of West Indies cricket, I mean, if you look at West Indies cricket in totality, they only played for the West Indies. They didn't get too much exposure. And I think a lot of their talent moved out of the country. There were some good players. I mean, you'll know them better than me. But they moved out. They stopped playing. They went into franchise cricket. I think they realized that this is where they need to make their money. And I don't blame them for that. Because you don't have a good connect with your administration, the board, and look at the difference or the disparity in salaries. Then you say, I'm not going to do anything after 40. You may as well earn my money now playing franchise cricket. And West Indies cricket just went down. Sad.
There's also the issue of acrimony because of the superstar status thingy that happens with Lara becoming just too big. Which perhaps even a Sachin or to some extent a Ricky Ponting, Jacques Calais, those kind of guys, are they bigger than the team? Do they divide the team because of their greatness?
It does, but it depends on who's around you. I mean, if a Sachin achieved greatness, there was a Dravid not far behind, there was a Saurav not very far behind, there were other players. You see, the difference in Lara achieving the greatness that he did with that, that purple patch of breaking world records, there's no one around in that team to actually compete with his stardom. And I got a feeling at that point, Lara may have become a little bigger than the game for himself.
A divisive force in the team.
A divisive force. Obviously, West Indies is always going to be a very difficult team to manage, to lead. There was the Trinidad gang, there was the Guyanese gang, there was
Jamaican
gang.
Yeah.
And obviously, then when you see the mosaic, and you see the crevices in that, you realize that superstardom to one player. People walked in to watch Lara. People watched him for his numbers, and maybe that, from a leadership perspective, it created a big divide in the team, and that actually was a start of breaking West Indies cricket. And I don't mean to criticize any individual here, but the fact is, when you achieve that stardom and people are actually coming in to watch only one player, it undermines the contribution of a team game.
But there were stories, untrue or true, I'm not sure, of clashes in '95 in the England series. He gets runs and all that, but he fights with Curtly Ambrose and doesn't get along with Walsh. And there's a huge... the team is not just divided in personality, but it's actually the people start taking sides. So maybe the younger ones are with Lara and the older ones are with the two fast bowlers. You're not listening to the manager. Earlier on, you wouldn't listen to Wes Hall, one of the biggest names in cricket. So that authority issue was happening because he, as you said, became bigger than the game. Again, this is hypothesis. We don't know for sure.
No, it is. And it's human. You see, when you start becoming bigger, and we haven't, of course, I haven't been there, so I have no authority to speak about it. Yeah, in your case, it's different. But when you become as big as Lara did, it's important also to carry the other players. Then you either carry them with you or they follow you. They follow you for vested reasons. They follow you because they feel, if I'm on the good side of Brian Lara, my future may be secure. I'll get that extra innings if I'm failing, stuff like that. And then there's the senior players like who've been around, the Walshes and, the Garners. They feel somewhere, the spotlight has moved. The arc lights have moved from us to somebody else, despite us being, loyal servants and contributors to a sport. And they've been there. You see their numbers and you know that they've been huge contributors to sport. It creates a divide.
So success causes trouble, basically, sometimes, especially in a team
if you
sport.
take all the arc lights and the attention and you don't think about the team per se. I got a feeling at that stage in West Indies cricket, there were issues like the South African connection. Players had gone off to South Africa who didn't get the attention or were neglected. They were left out. Then there were players who were aging good enough, but the philosophy of blood youngsters in also didn't help because they weren't as good enough. So when the philosophy of the management is to bring in youngsters, then the Hayneses of the world get, or Richardson,
Haynes could have played a little longer. But again, this is a call that with many greats.
I just believe that West Indian cricket started getting divided at that stage. While we saw a great player come in, deliver the numbers that he did in Brian Charles Lara, we also saw a team that was fragmented, it was breaking up, it wasn't united, and they didn't have a Clive Lloyd-like figure to bind them. And maybe it is the new generation. They don't look at seniors the way probably the Richards and the Greenwiches looked at. For them, Lloyd was a mentor, a leader.
Also, to put into perspective, he hit that 375, broke a long-standing Gary Sobers' world record, and then goes on to break that Hanif Mohammed record for Warwickshire, 501 not out, if you remember, all in the same season almost. And I think that just put him on another level.
And then he comes back to break Hayden's record again.
A few years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that once he goes into that level, he just became the guy people wanted to watch. Again, Sachin is the closest parallel I can draw to it. But as you said, Sachin was surrounded by people who were close to him. So in a sense, it didn't go to his head. Better brought up, more protection, can't say.
And Mumbai boy.
Mumbai boy, Shivaji Park for that matter. But coming back to Lara, and again, this is our theory. We don't know for sure. We're not in the dressing room. But that divisive thing didn't help them either. And then there's always a fear that the island politics can come into play as well, not to mention the superstar factor.
The island politics was one of the biggest problems, which was handled well during Lloyd's time and earlier. I think it wasn't handled well in Lara's time. You see, the first signs of a team breaking up is when you start using regional politics as an excuse. It wasn't used, Then you had the Guyanese, the Barbados boys, the Trinidadians. They all started distancing themselves from a collective team. And it's very tough to lead a congregation of countries to be playing for one country, the West Indies. So I think they lost that mentor figure. Lara wasn't a mentor figure. He was a great batsman, huge numbers, but again away from the team. I don't think he was with the team all the time. Sometimes when
Especially
you're
the young Lara. I think
when
in
you're
the second half, perhaps he was a little better.
when you're achieving so much, you need to carry the younger guys because you're an inspiration, you're an icon for them. It's important to bring them together.
And also not disconnect from the older guys who are feeling left out in a sense.
It happens, and that's why they say, when you have too many captains in a team, and it's a theory that when you have too many captains, past captains in a team, it's not a good sign, because there is a sense of insecurity that creeps in. There's a sense of losing out on popularity, which you've seen in the past. So a good captain generally doesn't want ex-captains in the side, and that's something that may have happened then.
Let's take a look at the IDFC first fact. In the 1980s, the mighty West Indies played 82 tests, won 43 of them and lost only 8. In the 90s, though, they lost 28 of the 81 tests and won only 30 of them. Okay? In the 2000s, they played 108 tests so far and lost 59 of them without winning too often. In fact, only 18 times in the decade. How sad is that? There's a horrible thing I want to ask you. I don't know if it's fair to ask you also. Is it possible that talent is dried up a little bit also? I would say the same thing about Pakistan in a sense, especially fast bowling.
When does talent dry up, Cyrus? Talent dries up when you have nobody to look up to. You and I grew up. I mean, you can imitate Viv Richards walking down.
I can do everything except that. Like
no,
him,
you can do it because you looked up to him.
Yeah.
You're a fan of his. You're a tragic. We grew up on the Gavaskars of the world.
Vishwanath, Jimmy Amarnath, Sandeep
Jimmy
Patil.
Amarnath.
They're all super.
So they, in a sense, inspired you to play the game. Now what do you have? After Lara, I don't think...
You got Brathwaite, flash in the pan. You got Alzari Joseph, who has a lot of talent, but not enough.
You won't be inspired by them. You get inspired by numbers. 501, as you said, was a number.
But he was another level.
Was
So I'm
another
asking
level.
they've always had those big genius players. And then
So the
suddenly
Lloyds of the world had the Kanais and the Sobers to emulate. They were inspired by them.
3Ws before that.
And the Viv Grenages, they had somebody to look up to. That era of the 60s. And then you had the Laras who looked up to the Vivs and the Grenages.
And then it falls off.
Today, tell me 3 great West Indian current batsmen, or 4 great.
Bit tough.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm not even saying great. Good players.
Brathwaite is the only one with an average in the 40s. I mean, that's it. And barely.
Why do you lose out on inspiration? Because you don't have somebody to look up to. Even and in an era of television, you say, "Wow, yeah, this is good." You're watching some good players. There's nothing there.
There were lots of areas and compartments where they got away with. They had a bit of a Roger Harper, but the spin was always a weak section. Suddenly they were playing on more wickets where, you needed spinners. And your 4 fast bowlers weren't enough in any case as you get into the 90s and later.
Honestly, Cyrus, Roger Harper won't give you sleepless nights.
Were they exposed by not having those departments?
They didn't have any. You look, in 71, and I hear stories from the late Dilip Sardesai, and they were in a rebuilding, and Gavaskar and Ajit Wadekar, they would talk about the West Indies. And Dilip Sardesai went in 62 to West Indies when Nari contractor got hit with, the Gilchrist and the Halls.
West Hall,
And apparently, when they went in 71, there was some Shillingford, Houghton Doe, there were some fast bowlers who were just young. And apparently, on the first day of that, they were playing against Barbados in a side game, and Dilip Sardesai...
But that's the point when Barbados was considered as good as any test team.
He looked at the fast bowler and says something in Marathi, which obviously on a sponsored program.
But a child version of that?
Like, this is rubbish. In Marathi, it'd be more...
more adult.
It'd be more direct and probably expressed better.
Families, members.
But that was the difference. After the Halls and the Gilchrists and, they had the Houghton Does and company. And then they had the spinners, Inshan Ali, Shillingford, who was Norega. They had some cricketers who played, but they weren't some players you'd fear. And then you came down to the next era, the Roberts and the Holdings and Marshalls, the Crofts.
Garner.
So you had players like Courtney Walsh following them.
But you had Wayne Daniels and Vincent Davis who can't get in to the side. And they were as good. You have Sylvester Clark.
Who spent most of their life playing county cricket.
Only, yeah.
Collis King. We've forgotten one of the game changers in the World Cup. Collis King, another great player, but somewhere lost in history.
Lawrence Rowe.
Again, he came to India. He lost his eyesight. They rated him the greatest.
As the best of his generation,
They called him the Black Bradman towards the end of his career. He played very little. He got a
Double
couple
century,
of
century in a
two double
test.
centuries.
Yeah.
I mean,
and a double century,
and
century
apparently
in a
he
test
used to
match.
whistle while playing the.
Well,
That's what I heard.
No, it's true.
But he came to India. He had a problem. He got 100, I think, against West Zone. We were kids then, but he got 100, and then he had an eye problem. Maybe it was, a retinal detachment or something, and his cricket was over.
But the point is that there was so much talent
Absolutely.
that you didn't miss Lawrence Rowan. And no disrespect to those who early days in West Indies cricket, but the next generation of superstars came. And even up to the early 90s, I'm still seeing they still had 7 or 8 world-class players in the team. But you started drawing series. Pakistan drew a series with them, I think New Zealand. So slowly they were being a little exposed. They were not dominating like they did under Lloyd. And then the decline became more apparent. And then War's team turns up in 1990. Is it War? The War brothers were a big partnership, at least. Which
the second era of the Invincibles.
Yeah, well, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And they actually lose at home, which is unbearable and unbelievable.
Yes, and the sad part about West Indies, towards the end, what you saw was they had spinners playing for them, trying to dominate or trying to win them games.
Well, they beat Pakistan in the second test match recently with their spinners, which is just growing up in the 80s,
would you have imagined spinners playing for, trying to win you games in the West Indies, known for quick. The pitches also lost that
became slower.
The bite that they had.
That is another thing we can talk about for a second, because Jamaica and Barbados were as quick as anything. Sabina Park was and Bridgetown were like unbelievable.
And the crowd stopped coming. You see, with West Indies losing, they had a great crowd support. I mean, people who played in the West Indies, you hear stories about the crowds being merciless, they being vociferous and really, getting at players. Every time a bouncer was bowled, they'd be laughing.
So we're getting lots of different reasons for the decline. There's no one reason.
Yeah, but I think the main reason is paucity of talent. Talent moving out.
And it's a small pool of people.
We can look at a lot of collaterals, but the fact is, when you lose talent and you have nobody to be inspiring you, like the earlier generation, you have no reason. Why is it that you want to play cricket when you have nobody to look up to?
So the question now is, where do they go from here? Again, there have been moments about a year and a bit back when the Sydney Test match, they played 2 Test series only. Now they're relegated to 2 Test series against the big teams. All you guys on Twitter were going berserk saying, is it the revival? Is it the revival? You beat Australia in Australia with a team which nobody thought of. You couldn't name 4 of the West Indian players that were on the park at that point.
And it's sad. This is where I think, the West Indies board needs to also look after their players. I think this is where, India, for whatever and however we are, we look after our players.
Yeah.
And
but we have the money.
We have the money. I think ICC gives a lot of money to every cricket board. But if it's channelized in actually bringing players from the grassroots level, it may help revive West Indies cricket, if not in the next 5 years.
So you're saying perestroika?
Yes,
restructuring
absolutely.
from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the grassroots.
Absolutely.
Redo everything.
Absolutely.
Because their first-class structures collapsed a little bit. The Caribbean Premier League seems to be the most important thing now in August, which they all play, which I don't think is, with due respect to T20, is not perhaps the right way to go for quality cricketers to be there for you in the next generation.
I've always believed this white ball is only a means to an end. The end must be to play for the country.
4-day games.
For the country.
Yeah.
You have 2 types of balls there.
Excuse
one
me?
is an expensive one, and one is not so expensive.
Okay.
The red ball is not so expensive because you don't get paid well.
Oh,
and
nice.
you'll find a lot of players not going for the red ball because there's no return on investment. It's happening in India. You'll see some of the big names not wanting to play the harder test cricket, go to England, struggle, play the short ball, the moving ball. They're happy with the white ball, and you get paid more for the white ball. Even in India,
So it's killing the quality is what you're saying.
people just don't want to play.
And the grassroots, as you mentioned earlier, is also a problem. Where's the school cricket going? Where's the first fundamental basic unit of cricket that they have is not as strong as, say, India, Australia, England, and countries like that. So they don't have that hierarchical system where you go
We're
up.
getting competition from football, basketball, and other sports.
Athletics? But they've done really well. Okay, one last question I have to ask you. Where are the fast bowlers? And I don't mean they have fast bowlers. Like Alzari is quickish. But where are the super demon fast bowlers? Where's the Patterson? Where's the young Ambrose? Where's the Malcolm Marshall at his peak? Where's the Michael Holding? Where's that quality of speed? There's no... I mean, get a 140, 145, yes, but they don't have a 155
They'd be either
bowler.
playing basketball or they'd be driving taxis in New York. They've all moved out for security. And they're all big guys that I mean, I remember in the 80s and early 90s when I went to Scotland, there'd be some fast bowlers playing in the leagues. And you looked at them, you say, my God, I've never played something as quick as this. So there are big boys who bowl fast. But they'd be driving taxis in New York or doing some jobs or, probably playing
So are we never
basketball.
going to see
I don't
a
think
Wesley
so.
Hall again
I don't
or
think
a
so.
Malcolm Marshall?
No, you won't see a Wes Hall, a Gilchrist.
So West Indies can never dominate.
I don't think you'll see it. And if it happens, I'm happy for the game of cricket. But in our living days, I don't think we'll again see that quality coming through. And they don't play county cricket, sadly.
No, but there's also the other thing about the talent that they have. I'm going back a few years, but still in the present generation. You look at an Andre Russell, a Nicholas Puran, for example, Dwayne Bravo just before that, Darren Bravo to some extent also. There was a lot of talent, but they turned away from red ball cricket.
Just turned away from playing for West Indies.
Turned
not
away.
Red Ball. They went away straight away to the franchise.
But that's a horrible situation to have in your next generation of quality cricketers. And Andre Russell could have been a fantastic test cricketer.
Cyrus, the problem is not about them turning away from Test cricket. They're turning away from probably the board that handled them poorly. I don't think any cricketer doesn't want to play for his country. I think it gives him a lot of pride. It's like playing
At
or
least initially.
representing your country in the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's not for money. They want to play for their country. Everybody.
And the free bag. Yeah.
But the point is, when you don't connect with your board, with the administration, you feel that the board gets paid well enough for you to demand a certain price. May not be as much as the IPL or the BBL, but certainly more than what you're getting. And then you say, I have an option. It's like going into a supermarket. You have shampoos. For dry hair, wet hair. They're called SKUs, I think, in marketing jargon. And you say, okay, I've got a choice. The shelf is increased. I pick up something that I'm more comfortable with. T20 cricket, more money, less strain,
Less time.
less time. I have to bowl 24 balls. Or I have to bat, say, 20
Sometimes
balls.
not even. Yeah.
And I'm getting paid a few million dollars. Why would I waste time, mentally with a board that I don't get along with the task of playing red ball cricket, the challenge of playing red ball cricket? 5 days. How many test matches last 5 days today? Tell me.
Very few.
I mean, do you have any draws?
In England, without rain, I'm looking at 3 days, all 5 tests.
Do you have any draws? I mean,
Almost only because of rain. Yeah.
so the whole prioritizing what you want to play versus what you're getting paid is very clear now. And that to me is the bigger worry of sport.
But this is a generic problem across the world, then, not just West Indies.
Yeah, but I think it gets a little amplified when it's West Indies because one is they don't have the talent. Talent's quickly after college getting out.
Disappears, yeah.
They're going to the West to New York to look for jobs. And I've met a lot of people. I went to New York a year ago, and I met a guy who I thought walked like a cricketer, at Times Square. And I asked him. I was just hanging around at Times Square. I said, "Did you play cricket?" He said, "Yeah, man." And he was a West Indian. I said, "Why did you leave?" He said, "Nothing to do. I need a job. I need to have a life." And you could tell by his swag, he had played cricket. So I, like a crazy, inquisitive Indian, went up to him and said, "Did you play cricket?" And he says, "Yeah, man." And I realized that, of course, it didn't matter to him that, I had played with X, Y, and Z. He said, "Yeah, but I needed a job." And I could tell by his walk, he must have been a promising fast bowler. So sometimes, you can tell by a swag that this youngster was cut out to play the sport, but he didn't play it. And I think it's the story of West Indies
You're
cricket.
making me very sad now. So what you're saying is the future is also looking bleak.
Really?
You don't really believe.
Non-existent.
In terms of Test cricket status, we will never see a Lloyd era again.
Never.
We are
Never.
unlikely to see those.
I'll be happy to be proven wrong, but never.
That's so sad. That's horrible. I feel like crying.
You can get yourself some...
Kleenex.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the point is, on a serious note, Cyrus, we'll laugh about it because we've seen the golden era of West Indies cricket and we are romantics. Each one who's watched that era has been a romantic. I mean,
And no one thought it would end. Because there was no paucity of the next bunch
Talent.
of bowlers. They just
Talent.
kept falling from the sky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Batting talent was there. Everything
I mean,
was
the
there.
guys, I think a lot had to do also, the start was a lot of players went away to South Africa on rebel tours.
That one
started
in the 80s, yeah.
That started.
Yeah.
That started a change where players started playing for money. They realized that going to South Africa and earning a living, or even if I get a ban, I'll be okay. I'll play county cricket. I'll play. See, it was about playing cricket and getting remunerated. And that tour, that rebel tour, a lot of guys who were not playing for West Indies went away.
Sylvester Clark and all these
Clark,
guys.
Norbert Phillip, maybe.
Was it Lawrence Rowe
who was the other guy who
Norbert
came,
Phillip, yes.
and who was the other guy who came who ran over an umpire in New Zealand? The pilot, Colin Croft.
Colin Croft, yeah, correct. 6'5",
Yeah. Great bowlers. Never got I didn't play as much for the West Indies because you had 5 or
banned
6
for 3
great
years,
bowlers in that squad. And these guys, Wayne Daniel, take these names. There's a guy called Ezra Mosley.
Yeah, he played a few tests, yeah.
Yeah, but he went off. He played
He
county
played towards the
cricket,
end of his career.
but he was playing
And
county
Richards brought him
cricket
in, yeah.
and the Lancashire leagues. They were all great.
No, in his pomp he didn't play. He was faster then.
Absolutely.
He played towards the end, yeah.
But
But
he-
how many names? You're naming these names and I'm thinking there were so many quality players.
So many
And
of
nothing
them.
now.
I just feel like
Yeah.
you and so many of us feel for West Indies cricket. We've seen them in their pomp. We've seen them succeed, inspire. We've tried to copy them
Yeah.
in each way, whether it is walking out, showing the
Personality-wise,
fearlessness.
they have left a huge mark on cricket. There's no question. The West Indies personality and how everyone
Absolutely.
tries to be that.
I mean,
going
I
forward.
tried for years to, do square cut like Gordon Greenidge or
Yeah.
go on
The
that
rapier.
one on the one leg to
Yeah.
hook. It didn't work for me, but still it stays in my mind. It's in my hard disk.
And before all these guys play all these great shots, with due respect, there was an IVA Richards who would go outside off stump and push it over mid-wicket. And, nobody had ever seen that before in cricket.
And there's that old story at Packer when Pascoe bounced to him.
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
must have asked him that.
Yeah, I
huh?
asked him. Yeah.
And the story goes, he said, "Okay, Lenny,
Yeah.
to show you you're like butter. I'm going
Butter,
to cut
Lenny,
you."
butter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And without a helmet.
Never. No helmet. Nothing.
These are stories we can sort of.
We can go on forever. We have to stop the show.
But the fact is,
Yeah.
the West Indies cricket has lost its charm, and we are grieving for them. Really.
We are. We really are. So talk to Shishir if you have time. Boards of the world, come together and save West Indies cricket. Not just for the West Indies, but also for all of us who love cricket.
Absolutely.
Now, because you stayed till the very end, here is a tip for you to stay safe online from IDFC FIRST Bank and me. A scam which is getting very popular these days is quishing. Hanji, quishing. Although the name is cute, the scam itself is very evil. Now, in quishing, the scammers will send you a QR code. You scan that, and it will redirect you to a fake website created by the scammers, which can store your personal information. To stay safe, never scan any QR code which is not shared by a trusted source, and don't ever share any kind of information via QR codes. Got it?